莉莉亚，你看，她醒了。Rosalia， 是的，没错，她醒了。
我曾经跨过山河大海，走过无数个春秋冬夏，一次又一次的努力，一次又一次的尝试。
我是黄敬城直属的女仆，同时也是皇帝国的宰相，丽塔洛斯威瑟。
你究竟是勇气可嘉，还是说仅仅只是一个不知天高地厚的傻瓜？
谢天谢地，你总算醒过来了。成为我的仆从吧，我会让你活到世界末日。
没有，你不要过来啊！
希尔，对不起。
哼，终于回想起来了吗？没错，虽然你最终赢取了许愿的资格，但却因为种种不可描述的原因，而失去了回到你本该回到之处的途径。孤的阵图久经实验，本该完美无缺，最后却因你无聊的执念而生出诸多变数，以至于连孤自身也被卷入其中，狼狈至此。不擅长告别吗？在很久以前，似乎也有人对我说过相同的话。但孤等在这里，就是为了给这场闹剧彻底画上一个句号。离开的时间到了，舰长。君无戏言，孤不会擅自允诺自己做不到的事情。是，我为什么要救你这家？心系苍生是帝王的美学，而且不知为何，明明相貌完全不同，看到你，我却总会不自觉地想起一位故人。
With images of the past lingering on his retinas, Captain could hardly see what lay before him. Very soon, the flashing images settled down. Suddenly, a voice calls out to him, along with a violent tug at the arm.
喂，快让开，别挡我的路！你怎么不听人说话？再下去就要被追上了。不管了。
It's Kongming. But the way she speaks is different. It's actually Terry Ree, the magic girl Imperius, the Grand Seeress. However, she says that she is a fugitive now and is confused as to why Captain is here. She tells him that this place is the ruins that he's been to before. Captain tells Teresa that Kongming was supposed to send him back to the Hyperion, but Teresa is in disbelief. Not long after, a harsh kick sends Captain to the ground and they're both captured by guards.
分开他们，带走。
Captain's hands were tied behind his back and a bag over his head. With a tug of a rope, he was sent faltering forward. Captain uses this time to sort out his thoughts. He didn't return to the Hyperion, and he's not on the island either. Instead, it seems he has returned to the era of the Holy Sheiksel Empire, Hormungand, and Emberia. Eventually, his captor stopped and took the gunny sack off of his head.
以一己之力终结三国之乱，一统天下的圣贤王，关心陛下。
Having confirmed the Grand Seeress was indeed Kongming, Captain was mightily relieved, and didn't heed the angry guard. He begins talking to her casually.
放肆！你怎么敢用这种口吻和圣贤王说话？
Kongming tells him his calm is intriguing, but she didn't look intrigued in the slightest. Instead, her eyes were cold and dark. Though the look alone didn't frighten Captain, seeing it on a familiar face was blood-chilling. What happened? If the guard wasn't lying, then what happened to Shixel and Hormungand?
来人，给德丽莎大人更衣。
Combing then orders her maidens to dress Teresa. The maidens flew in with Teresa's stage outfit, in which she used to shine bright like a diamond, but now she was struggling against the maidens forcing her into her favorite dress. Combing wants Teresa to sing only for her. No matter how many times Teresa tries to run away, Combing assures her she will always find her. Having lost her fighting spirit, Teresa's head sank. Once the loved and respected Grand Seeress, she's now no more than a bullied little girl trying to hold back her tears. What on earth happened to Amberia? Since there's a more important matter at hand, Combing tells Captain to enjoy the show.
放开我！
A fiery ball made Captain turn his head to find two more familiar faces. The two were, without a doubt, the Archimperator and the Corsair Queen. Combing forces the two to battle to the death. After the duel ends, the winner is killed by Combing. Realizing that there wasn't going to be any survivors in Combing's game, Captain's senses finally came to him. As cold sweat washed over his back, he could still hear the fading scream of Teresa. Combing walked up the stairs and took the silk handkerchief from the maiden to wipe the blood off her face. She then waves the maidens to bring 2 cups with wine and invites Captain to have a taste, but as he was still shocked, she decides to drink first. 1 sip later, Combing frowned and flung the cup onto the floor. With another brittle clash, the cup before Captain had joined it.
白糟蹋了这酒。来人，带走。
The wine-serving maiden knelt down and kowtowed, only to be dragged away brutally by a guard. 2 more maidens came forward to clean up the mess as well as serve the wine in new cups again. Trying to ease up the tension, Captain took the cup with a nervous hand and finally sipped to soothe his tongue. A few cups later, Captain's brain began to turn again and he finally took note of something unusual. Where is Rita, the Grand Chancellor? Combing paused for a second. She played with the cup in her hand before topping herself and toasting to the sky.
丽塔死了。
It all started with the 3 years she stayed on the island. She had reinforced the seal on Huoldol several times, but 3 years was too long for it to be left unchecked. After it broke free, the Empire was its first victim, and by the time she returned, Rita was already fighting it. 1,000 years ago, Combing once sealed Huoldol with her formation along with the help of her friends. This time however, her old friends were already gone and without their help, sealing the beast became far more difficult. Though Combing had asked for help from the other 2 kingdoms, the 2 envoys she sent didn't make it back, let alone any reply. Instead, they stood idle while Amberia fought Huoldol, and preyed on them once they were weakened. After Combing had finally developed a new formation and went to Rita so they could stop Huoldol together, she discovered that Rita was already dead. Her scythe laid by the river, Huoldol was long gone, and Rita was lying in the water as if quietly asleep. Though there were more wounds on her than she could possibly count, Rita wasn't bleeding anymore. Combing cuddled her cold body until night fell and stars rose above the sea. As Teresa won't believe Rita is dead, Combing took the throne from her, and the rest is history. Combing then invites Captain to indulge her with a game of chess. Before Captain could say anything, Combing took out a chessboard and set the game on the table. She claims that some things are better told over the chessboard. As she winkled with wily eyes, Captain wondered if it was the wine working, as it seemed like the old and familiar Combing had returned. Combing continues. Ironically, thanks to Rita's death, Combing had accomplished in 3 months what she had failed to do in centuries. She then quotes something.
孤有时总想起那时人说的话，自今而始，汝二人便得长生不老之躯。若无外祸，将永生不死。
Despite being immortal, they weren't free from death. Captain questions if the quote came from the golem in the ruins, and Combing tells him it's from an earlier time. Not being sure on how to continue the topic, Captain could only pretend to focus on the chessboard. Combing landed one piece after another with hardly any thinking, but as the game continued, it felt as if her breathing became heavier.
居酒退2。
Combing waved her hand signaling Captain to continue, and the game went on until... Combing's cup fell off her hand and Captain rose to his feet. The guards came at him, but stepped back because of Combing's threat. It seems Combing's time has come. She explains to Captain that the previous flagon had been poisoned because her 2 prisoners had bought off her maiden, and Captain realizes why Combing's mood had such big sways earlier. She knew it was poison at the first sip and stopped Captain from drinking it in a subtle way, but why? If she had spoken out earlier, then she could have been saved, but Combing shook her head.
所以，孤放任自己喝下毒酒，是因为终于了无牵挂了吗？还是因为孤终于确信了，你就是那个人呢？
Long, long ago, when Combing was still a 12-year-old princess, she fled the capital trying to save the empire on her own. Out of nowhere, a nobody showed up and seemed hell-bent on helping and protecting her. She also had help from her uncle, Durando, and Miss Iron Fist, but how did things end up like this? A year after the one left her, Imperial Year 72, Ming went to the ruins alone to check on the seal. As the seal began to wane, she stayed there to strengthen it, but amid the ruins, memories of the past awakened. What was the one doing now? When would fate bring them together again? In what future would their reunion happen? In an attempt to analyze Miss Iron Fist, the only thing left to her by the one, Ming thought she had the secret and developed a new formation, but it only brought Rosa and Lily here. Sending Captain back was to right a wrong, since technically, it was her fault. In the 3 years drifting on the island, Ming observed Captain, but somehow, Captain always reminded her of the one. Seeing Ming on the verge of collapse, Captain swept the board aside and got hold of her before she fell. She reached out her shivering hand trying to touch Captain's face.
现在，我终于可以确定了。
Maybe she mistook Captain for an old friend, but something in her determined eyes made Captain doubt his identity. Ming tells Captain that though he looks different, a person's nature does not change easily. She doesn't know how he did it, but when Captain said he'd leave, the person that was supposed to be him passed out. After that person woke up, they had no memory about her. Her assumption is that Captain somehow borrowed the body of someone from this world. Only Miss Iron Fist can confirm her theory, but she's been in a 1,000-year-long slumber. Ming studied her over and over and, with a little bit of luck, developed the unstable formation that split Captain into 2 halves, with the second half emerging 3 years later than the first. This time, however, Captain arrived here 3 months later than her. Ming believes that Miss Iron Fist is the key to altering her ill fate. If there's anyone in the world that can wake her up, it can only be Captain. In Captain's arms, Ming mustered the last of her dying strength.
如果是你的话，你一定能找到一个方法，救救皇帝国，救救丽塔，救救我。我还记得你和我那时说过的话，在那遥远的未来，再会吧。所以，请带我去能与你相逢的真正的未来。拜托你了，刺客先生。
The shivering in her suddenly stopped. The elders used to say stars were people among us, when the ocean and sky were still connected. Someone took a raft to drift across the ocean, but ended in the sky as a shining star. Captain held her in his arms, and whispered her name softly. But the world only gave him dead silence as reply. In Ming's bedchamber, a small figure was sitting with its back against the screen. The moment Captain's hand came in contact with Miss Iron Fist, an electric flux surged around her and shot up his finger. Captain was taken aback by the verification message. It seems Tesla Zero is her real name. No way she's from this era. Captain begins babbling uncontrollably. He didn't know what he was saying, but he had to say something. After detecting keywords, something seems to start.